Hey guys, back here with another list, and as we celebrate the Friday the 13th holiday, I don't think there's any better way to do it than taking a look at some unproduced ideas from the Friday the 13th universe. Now, the big man Jason himself has been a bit MIA lately, over a decade of no theatrical releases, and seemingly Crystal Lake is on a creative hold for right now, so we're just kind of standing here with our machetes in our hands, skipping rocks on Crystal Lake, wondering what is next for the franchise. So I decided, let's reminisce, let's take a look at some past ideas when possibilities were endless, ideas were in abundance, and we didn't know what was next for Friday the 13th. But before we hop into a list, please like, subscribe if you've just wandered on the channel, because it is Friday the 13th. And if you know a horror fan that is not subscribed or knows about Splattercast, please spread the word. It would help us immensely. But now that we have that out of the way, let's take a look at some unproduced ideas that could be, maybe should be, resurrected. Coming in at number 5, Friday the 13th Part 3, The Return of Jenny? Final girls have become a vital part in the slasher subgenre equation. Halloween has Laurie, Elm Street has Nancy, and in more modern times, Terrifier has Sienna. Looking at the Friday the 13th model, they went a bit of a different route with their final boy in Tommy Jarvis, but for a moment, this franchise almost hit its final girl with Amy Steele's Jenny. Creating a likable and strong female character in Part 2, there was an attempt and offer to bind Jenny and Jason together. The pitch being, Jenny being locked away in a mental hospital, while Jason pursues her to get his revenge, he lays waste to everyone else in the psychiatric facility. Amy Steele was asked about this version of a script in 2018. While she did comment she didn't hear about that idea, she does remember uncovering a portion of a script where we catch up with Jenny dealing with a large amount of PTSD. She's now in college and apparently trained in jiu-jitsu. She finds the head of Paul in the dryer of her apartment complex. Now, this is pretty reminiscent of the beginning of Part 2, when Alice bites the big one, when Mrs. Voorhees' baby boy gets his revenge for killing his mother. Believing Jason is out to get her, Jenny teams up with Ted. Yes, Ted does make an appearance apparently, as they attempt to hunt down Jason once and for all. Now, it is possible that both of these different instances could have been from the exact same script, as Steele admits that she only read about a third of the actual script itself, presenting an interesting change of scenery from Camp Crystal Lake to a mental hospital. Would have been a really unique installment for Friday the 13th, especially into a Part 3 such early on in the franchise, stepping away from that wilderness aspect and more so into the city. When you look at Part 3 and what we did actually get there, it brings up a lot of interesting questions if Jenny did come back. That third installment does play a pivotal role of what the future of the franchise does look like. I mean, Jason does get his hockey mask in Part 3 and keeps it as we know that version of Jason today. Would that still have happened? Now, I think it poses an interesting question and some ideas that us being in the psychiatric hospital, of exactly how that story would have went down and what kind of kills we would have gotten. Now, we've seen some portrayals of psychiatric units in past franchises, Halloween being one of them. They always have characters that do enjoy making masks. I'm curious if they would have found some way to get Jason either a different mask or even the hockey mask. I think this could have presented a lot of interesting avenues, but certainly if Amy Steele would have returned, I think this could have easily altered what the franchise does look like now. Taking the number 4 spot, The Trial of Jason Voorhees. As far back as 1987, New Line was trying to figure out how to get Jason and Freddy on screen together for a battle of slashers horror fans had been talking about for years. We would eventually get that over a decade later, courtesy of Shannon Swift, who we'll talk about a little bit later on this list. After dismissing a script from Louis Abernathy, New Line brought in Brandon Braga and Ronald Moore to tackle the task of bringing these two slasher icons together. In 1995, the trial of O.J. Simpson was a huge talking point in pop culture, so Braga and Moore intertwined that element into their version of a script titled Jason vs. Freddy. In this script, Jason is an actual serial killer. Creating a meta approach, the narrative conceptualizes the Friday films, and that version of Jason are based on this actual serial killer named Jason Voorhees, who is standing trial. Jason is shot in the courtroom by a family member of one of the victims, causing him to undergo surgery. Now, being an insomniac, Jason is put to sleep for a surgical procedure, and that's where he encounters Freddy Krueger. Freddy slices open Jason's chest and uses that as a portal to cross over into the real world. And then, hijinks ensue. The real Jason Voorhees requires the help of his public defender and a doctor to help battle Freddy in a shopping mall. The script creates some connective tissue between the two slashers and adds in this element of waking nightmares into the lore of Freddy. This is one hell of a fever dream of a script, but mixing the true crime aspect with complete and utter mayhem and some body horror at the end, this could have made for a crazy chapter in both these slasher stories. Number 3, Finding Voorhees. Sean S. Cunningham takes a look at found footage. After the 2009 remake, the franchise had stalled, and while there was a follow-up script that never made it to the big screen, Sean S. Cunningham was trying to figure out what to do with Jason next. With the Paranormal Activity franchise eating up big box office numbers, Cunningham and Paramount thought maybe found footage would be a great avenue for the next Friday film. Enlisting producers Brad Fuller and Andrew Form to get the project off the ground, Paramount listened to some pitches on what they could do with that found footage concept. Both Fuller and Form weren't fans of the found footage angle, feeling like it messed with what made the slasher subgenre work. People being stalked and in danger, but diving into the found footage compromised the prey element too much. The idea was scrapped and Jason continued wandering aimlessly through the woods. Not being a big found footage fan initially, I wasn't really intrigued by this idea, but seeing how well found footage can actually be done, I would have loved to have seen how this was going to turn out. Maybe not as a main installment in the franchise, but possibly a side mission of sorts. As we sit here in 2024, we've had films like Prey being released streaming that have kind of rekindled the Predator franchise, and then we're getting films that are releasing simultaneously on streaming as well as in theaters. So the landscape for storytelling when it comes to streaming has really changed since 2013 when this idea was initially floated. Seeing franchises like Hell House and VHS find their groove with found footage and thrive, I think this could have been an interesting avenue to have some sort of Friday the 13th series on one of these streaming platforms. Maybe intertwine some already established lore, possibly with someone like Reggie the Reckless from The New Beginning, coming back to Crystal Lake to kind of put an end to the Jason Voorhees mythos and prove that it was Roy Burns all along. But Jason shows up. Adding that found footage aspect to a side story like this in the franchise, I think could present some new tension and really alter that dynamic that we're so familiar with when it comes to Camp Crystal Lake. Taking the number 2 spot, Shannon and Swift's Friday the 13th, Camp Blood. In 2009, a younger generation was introduced to Camp Crystal Lake with the reimagining of Friday the 13th from Marcus Nispel. Penned by Damian Shannon and Mark Swift, who also gave us a much more coherent Freddy vs. Jason that we saw in 2003, produced a script that covered all the lore from the past films in an organic and well-paced manner. Paying tribute to an established story in one of the strongest openings in a horror film, the rest of the story finds its groove with some familiar tropes and characters that we all love. It seemed Jason was back on the big screen, a great jumping off point to see what splash a sequel would make to its audiences. Unfortunately, as legal battles started to ignite, we would never see that sequel from Shannon and Swift, but we did get a few bites of the script that would make you hungry for the whole meal. The script opens up in the dead of winter, which has been what all Friday fans have wanted since the 80s. Aesthetically, I think this would have gotten anyone pumped to see this version on the big screen. While the script would fast forward to that next summer, seeing Jason surrounded by piles of snow would have been so gratifying. Jason crashes a hockey game between two characters as he dispatches one on the ice and hunts the other one down in the snow. In addition to the winter element, Shannon and Swift shared a fun and unique kill as a character goes down a zipline. Noticing Jason at the bottom, our character is unable to stop herself as she's sliced in half from the waist, leaving us to imagine the amount of gore that would have been in this script. While these are only tidbits of scenes, it really shows how much of a grasp Shannon and Swift have on the franchise, and how to produce familiar situations in organic ways that don't feel forced. Being able to use the 2009 film as a reference point that balances an already established narrative and then gives us that iconic formula makes you wonder how much of a missed opportunity it was to not produce a sequel from a film that set the table so perfectly. Taking the number 1 spot, what's old is new again, Nick and Tosca's Friday the 13th 3D. While his script doesn't break out of the mold of a pretty basic slasher story, it has the charm that would have put a new coat of paint on Friday the 13th. Having experienced the nostalgia wave for the 80s in the horror genre, with Stranger Things leading the charge, the film's release could have capitalized on that nostalgia, as the setting is 1988. And Tosca's script, titled Friday the 13th 3D, would have taken advantage of the 3D angle that was hot at the time, but could have easily dated the movie depending on the visual approach. But reading the script, the narrative doesn't seem to cater to the 3D elements like we saw in Part 3. And Tosca produced a tight and coherent script with characters a lot of fans would have found smarter than what we've seen in the past. Making the Jason character feel reminiscent of the 2009 remake, he has an extra hint of brutality and rage that would have satisfied gorehounds and terrified a general audience. Taking place at the end of the summer rather than the beginning gives us a slight change in what we usually see. Instead of our camp counselors getting to know each other, they're already settled in their relationships and we're kind of playing catch-up as the audience, so to speak. The script lays a lot of groundwork with our characters, as Jason's that looming specter that we're familiar with, creating some great tense moments with Jason stalking our camp counselors in the woods. This would have scratched every itch a slasher fan has. The tension-filled third act culminates when Jason escapes from an ambulance with a bone saw and produces an amount of gore that would make Art the Clown blush. Now, the script from Tosca is readily available online. I highly recommend checking this one out. And when you read it, you may look at it and say, there's nothing out of the ordinary here, but the way Tosca is able to encapsulate what makes the Friday the 13th film so great and is able to modernize it in a sense with that nostalgic feel from 1988, I think if this one would have been able to be produced, that a lot of people from a new generation would have fallen in love with what makes Jason so great. Well, there you have it, guys. A bunch of different takes, ideas, a bunch of different avenues the Friday the 13th franchise could have wandered down. Unfortunately, they were not meant to be, but if the legal issues ever get figured out and we get some more Friday the 13th stories to be told, I think maybe they have some pretty good ideas in their back pocket that they could expand upon. I was really excited to check out this list, check out some different ideas, really got my brain going of what could have been or what could be eventually down the line. I think there's a lot of potential here. If you enjoyed this list, please give me some opinions down below of which idea you like the best, or if I did not mention a particular idea or script, please notify me. I would love to take a look. And if you have a take of your own for where the Friday the 13th franchise should go, please let me know. So if you're not, please like, subscribe, share this video. It did take a little bit to put together. But until next time, I'm Luke Janesco, and stay scared.
Do the horse shit, gonna do it live, 'cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, we slash ass, Splattercast, we slash ass.